Can you tell us what is She Who Sits and how were you inspired to create these pieces?
She Who Sits is an exhibition in partnership collaboration with Public Art Fund on bus stops around Boston, New York, and Chicago. And the opportunity to do this came to me through curator Janae Strand, who's the curator of my exhibition. And she presented the idea of, Public Art Fund commissioning works for bus stops. And so it was a really interesting opportunity because normally I'm used to showing my work in galleries or museums and spaces where people come to that specifically to see art. So it was an opportunity to think about how the work could live in a public space.
And were there any specific people that you found inspiration for when you were creating these portraits?
The idea came from I wanted it to very simply center Black women sitting and thinking about the history of public transportation, public spaces. The act of sitting has been used as a political act for sit-ins or freedom rides or even school integration to sitting in a classroom. And so I really wanted to just look at that simple act of sitting at a bus stop. And so it wasn't that I needed to have sort of some famous, exceptional person to be
Right.
sitting in the portraits because these acts that I was thinking about are done by, everyday citizens.
Yeah.
And it's a very simple act. So one of the portraits is of my mother. One of them is from a archival photo of a civil rights protest in Birmingham, Alabama, and it's from this church group that went to sit in a park. And then the rest of them are of this fictional character that has reoccurred in my work. And I kind of used her as this surrogate to fill lots of different ideas that I'm thinking about in the work. So I can put my own personal experiences into her story, or I can gather stories from different people I've researched, famous figures, historical figures, or my family. And so she's kind of moved throughout my work in this way that allows me to play with lots of different ideas.
Awesome. And you're talking a little bit about this character, this fictional character, as well as the other real life people. What is your definition of a Black matriarch, and how did these figures portray that?
Yeah, I think for the idea of a matriarch is kind of the leader of a unit, a family unit specifically is kind of I think how it's often referred to. I think the work was about centering a Black woman as the central protagonist. It's just a role that has not been historically given to Black women, whether it's literature or movies or you know, books. And so I wanted to have the central figure and most of the paintings, the only figure to be this Black woman and centered in her own world.
And, when people see these works, they're going to be either waiting for their bus stop or on the bus. When they see these works and then they get on their transportation, what do you want these works to remind them of? What thoughts are you hoping provokes in these folks?
I mean, the first thought is, I want it to grab their attention. They're all pretty brightly colored. That's, intentional, and that I want them to sort of pull attention. They're in public space, and draw people to them. Hopefully make their day just a little bit better just by enjoying the formal elements, the color, the composition, just like a nice painting. But I hope they consider the sort of simple element of what's happening in the photos. There's nothing monumental happening. They're in private spaces and private moments, small, quiet moments, and that they sort of compare that moment happening in the painting to their own moment on a bus. You're in transit. It's not the moment that you probably even remember the next day or the next week. These quiet moments are not normally memorialized. So wanting people to just sort of like take a moment to think about their own um, time sitting on the bus or the bus stop.
Right. And there's so many beautiful moments in that too, right? Just having quiet time to yourself to think about your life and your people and everything that's happening. So She Who Sits isn't just going to be in Boston. It's also going to be, like you said, in New York and Chicago. What are your connection to these places, and why did you decide to put these portraits in those cities?
Yeah, it was kind of just kismet that it turned out that the cities that were already part of the Public Art Fund project were cities that I have personal connections to. So the project came to me, it already was a project that was in Boston, Chicago, and New York. I've lived in all three cities. I went
Mm.
to undergrad in Boston at Boston University. I went to grad school in Chicago. Also grew up in the northern suburbs of Chicago, like middle school, high school years. And I live currently and live and work in New York. So they all are cities that I have deep roots in.
Amazing, yeah. And you can kind of imagine who the people are who are going to be seeing that and what their roots are. So that's really cool. You can place yourself in that
Mhm.
point of view. Um, so, why use a bus stop as a medium? Why not like a huge mural or something else public?
Yeah, I think it was really enticing to me when it came to me because, it wasn't a location I chose. It was a location that came to me, and then I got to sort of meditate on why that was an interesting location. And I looked up the history of these bus stops through the partner organization JC Deco, is the advertising company that owns the bus stops. And they have this whole history of the invention of the bus stop and creating these spaces to rest for commuters. And I was thinking about the sort of democratizing space of the bus. It's a space for commuters. It's not luxurious. It's, for the mass public. It's, uh, this kind of transit is for everybody to get to work, get home, see their friends, see, family members. And so it's this space that I feel like is a bit more even open than as much as, museums or galleries are free to the public. They feel kind of elite and they feel a little maybe exclusive. And so I like that this was something that someone who might not go to a gallery or think about going to a museum in their free time can experience art, can have a moment with this work, and hopefully, take in some of the ideas and thoughts that were a part of me producing the work.
Amazing. And I want to talk a little bit more about the idea of a Black matriarch. When you were physically creating the works, did you have any image in mind, any feeling, any memory that helped you create this exhibition?
Yeah, I mean there's this character in my work who I've been thinking about a lot, but I started to recently think about who her maternal lineage is, were like who the Black matriarchs were in her family, who the her mother, her grandmother, and that very much connected to my own experience. Think about my family and my mother and my grandmother. My mother passed last year, so the painting of her that's a part of the six works is the first painting I made after she passed. And so there's this ability to think of, to memorialize people, but also just to think about the impact of Black women in something like the civil rights movement. They weren't necessarily centered in the narratives that are in history books, but integral into these movements and integral into the organization of Black communities and Black families. And so it's a way to sort of honor those women in my life, but also just historically.
Awesome. And where can viewers learn more about She Who Sits, learn more about you, and learn where to go see these portraits?
Yeah, there's on the Public Art Fund website. I believe it's publicartfund.org. They have all the information about this exhibit and also maps for each city, so you can actually see where all of the bus stops are for each city. So that's a great resource. And my website, AdrienneEliseTarver.com. You can see more about my work.